Good afternoon, everybody. As Mary might have said, my name is Nicholas Baume. I'm the Director and Chief Curator of the Public Art Fund in New York. And I am lucky enough to have the opportunity now for the third year in a row to curate the public section of this fair. So what that means basically is that all of the galleries in the fair have the opportunity to apply to have work by their artists included in this public exhibition, which, since I've been doing it, and for a couple of years before then, has been in Collins Park, which is the rather beautiful park quite close here to the convention center in front of the Bass Museum. I hope you've all been to the park. If you haven't, maybe when the weather improves, you'll go take a look, and I guess we're just going to scroll through images as we're talking today about the showing the installation in the park. Also, we in fact had opening events on Tuesday and Wednesday evening, so some of the shots are probably from those evening events where we also had performances. So there's kind of multiple aspects to the, to the whole program. But I guess just to sort of zoom out again to the context and the structure. So galleries have to apply. As curator, I can't just approach artists and say, you're in this show, let's go. It's really got to be more of a dialogue with the artist, the gallery, the fair. There's also a panel of representatives of sort of the committees that, Art Basel has committees which are, dealers who participate in the fair. So once we do the selection, so I have conversations with artists, with galleries, and some of those lead to applications that come in. And then there are other applications that come in that are, just produced by the gallery in discussion with the artist that I'm not aware of. So it's actually a wonderful kind of learning opportunity for me, because they're often artists who I don't know or haven't had the chance to work with, as well as artists I know quite well and have thought, oh, wouldn't it be fantastic to have X artist in the show. And then we, I kind of go through and think about what would work best, given that, it's a great sized park, but it's not limitless, and you want to be able to give every work enough space to breathe and kind of do its own thing. But you also, I think, want to make it feel like it's a part of the art fair, and that it's having conversations with other works, that you're getting a very different exhibition experience than you would perhaps in a more traditionally curated exhibition that I might do for a park in New York City. So this to me is really about those unexpected connections, those fortuitous juxtapositions, those contrasts of generation, nationality, scale, material, medium that you get in an art fair. And that's sort of part of, I think, the richness and the excitement of being able to do an exhibition like this. So for me, it's very fun because I can approach it in a much looser way than I would get to do sort of curating a public art fund show in New York. And I also get to kind of meet a lot of artists and work with artists that I haven't had the chance to before. To wit, to my right, for example, Ishmael Randall-Weeks is an artist that I had not had the opportunity to work with before, but who did a really wonderful installation in the park. So we'll hear more about that and his work. Xavier did a performance for the opening, And in fact, that sort of brings up this other aspect, which is really nice. Art Basel kind of gets behind the idea of commissioning performances for the opening. So we present them on Tuesday night at the VIP opening, and we repeat them on Wednesday night for the general public. So it's also a really nice thing that we can animate the park with performances. We can invite the public to participate in Art Basel for no charge. Of course, the exhibition is there as a kind of gift to the public all through Art Basel, and in fact, a lot of the work stays in the park beyond, and the Bass Museum then takes over the kind of running of the show and keeps that going under their temporary contemporary program, which is great. And so I was thrilled that Xavier did a performance this year, which involved some local Miami talent as well as some imported expert. So we'll hear more about that. And Hank Willis Thomas then is an artist who I've gotten to know quite well because we just did a fantastic exhibition with him in New York City. My colleague Andrea Hickey curated, and in fact, Hank, I included Hank's work in last year's exhibition as well, so he's a kind of now veteran of the outdoor exhibition in Collins Park, but it was really fantastic to have him back with a kind of brand new piece that actually came out of this new body of work that he did in New York City. So even I think right here with our panel today, you get a sense of the range of artists that, we're able to bring together for this exhibition. In fact, this year we have 27 artists that have done installations, sculptures, site-specific works, and 4 performances. So, a lot of artists all working to create something, I think, really unique for this very specific context, too. So I think the way we're going to proceed today, having given you something of an overview, will be to hear from each of the artists, and maybe we'll talk a little bit sort of following that. And, I'd love to invite members of the audience to engage and ask any questions that you have as well. And that should take us through to afternoon tea time. So, Ishmael, perhaps why don't we kick off, if you could tell us a little bit about your work in the show and your practice.
Thank you. I guess it's working. I am an artist that is based now more so in Lima, Peru, where I'm from. I'm from Cusco, but I live in Lima, although I go back and forth between New York quite a bit. This work was actually produced in Lima. It's a piece titled Paraíso, and it was based off of old Huaca, which is a ceremonial pre-Inca site that was kind of flattened or destroyed in an area outside of Lima by this woman that said she owned the land and she wanted to build buildings there. So I wanted to kind of, in a way, reference that original sacred site, but with contemporary bricks that she was building these new buildings out of. It was built in the brick factory, which has allowed me to actually think a lot about bricks too while I was there, because the bricks are made with 70% topsoil from farmland and 30% clay. So in essence, this brick factory, what it does is it collects all the topsoil and all the clay and makes these huge mountains to then process them into these building blocks, the Metaform. And it's a kind of a cyclical thing. You have the land, the soil, the brick coming back to the land, to the soil in the form of the building.
So just to interrupt for 1 second, Ishmael did remind me just there that the exhibition. I didn't actually talk about the exhibition theme, Metaforms, but maybe we'll do that. Should I do that now or when we come back? I'll do it now. Okay, quickly, to interrupt. Sorry, that was like a false start. But I do like, even though the exhibition is obviously a really diverse range of works, I do try to frame it with a concept that gives it a kind of narrative, a kind of structure, a kind of coherence that's broad enough to embrace, obviously, such a wide range of works, but which also kind of gives us a way of thinking about it. And what really struck me, I wait, till I've seen the applications and the works that are being proposed to really think about how to frame it. But what I was very struck by this year was how artists were taking forms from everyday life, things that we recognize, sometimes very explicitly, sometimes that have gone through a process of abstraction, recognizable objects, or natural forms, or things from pop culture, but all, the stuff of everyday life, in a sense. So that's the idea of the forms. The meta comes in thinking then about how in each case the artist has filtered this form through their own artistic language and has revealed or augmented or somehow transformed that object into something else. So it's that kind of shared moment of transformation that we see, and these distinctive artistic languages that we see as well, while at the same time still kind of having that reference point back to the form that we kind of recognize in a very day-to-day kind of sense. So a brick is obviously a great example of exactly that idea. Ishmael, back to you after that rude interruption.
I'll be brief on the rest of that. I don't know where I was, somewhere. But I think mountains, topography, but also think about the cities, think about Lima or Sao Paulo or Mexico City, and think about these kind of massive, huge developments. Lima's a city, 9 million people in the middle of a desert. So it's our landscape is very dry, and a lot of what you see is these kind of unfinished buildings. The reason you see a lot of unfinished buildings in brick is because there are laws that say you don't have to pay your taxes if you don't finish a building. So I guess part of it comes out of seeing the city, but the other part is seeing all these kind of stacks of bricks that are everywhere. And I wanted to kind of make a gesture that referenced that Huaca da Paraíso, as well as the construction of it. And I like that kind of added element of the shipping pallets because it talked a lot about transience and about kind of mobility and about the fact that our culture in its cyclical way is movable too. So that's the work. And it's space. It's also about the human, about your body in relationship to these materials, these everyday materials, which I appreciate it. So the scale is appropriate to that.
Hi, I'm Xavier, and I did the performance that you see with the men flipping the tires and the woman performing Tai Chi. And it was titled Supreme Ultimate Exercise. But Tai Chi translates as Supreme Ultimate Movement or something like that. So that's where the title comes from. But also, it just sounds like the tire exercise would be called that, the whole extreme, supreme, jumbo, extreme. And down the two paths in Collins Park, they're adjacent. The two men, the muscle men, there's three at some of the performances. We're doing a choreographed tire routine of flipping them and doing jump squats with them and chest presses. And each tire weighed, I think, 400, 500 pounds. And it took about 20 minutes, and during that same duration on the adjacent path would be the Tai Chi master performing these very measured, slow, controlled movements. And for me, it was very, very specific to the context and the park and the environment of, I mean, just like any kind of Art Basel party, like half the people see performance and they're just like drunk and like, oh, you know, like, what's that? What's going on? And like, don't really acknowledge any deeper level of it. But I felt like this was appropriate because it has that kind of surface spectacular level of appreciation that's accessible, like the, you know, muscle men, and but then I think it also has like layers of more of a conceptual thing that I think relates back to the Metaforms thing. And I guess that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Hank Willis Thomas, and it's really great to be here with you all. And it's awkward to be back for the second year in a row because I can't wait for next year when it's going to be really amazing. Last year, I was here with a project, the collaborative project called In Search of the Truth, aka the Truth Booth, which is a large 21-foot by 14-foot by 8-foot inflatable speech bubble where members of the public are invited to go in, and there's a touchscreen that asks you to start with this statement, the truth is, and then speak for the next 2 minutes. And we had, in that 1 week, over 1,500 people go into the booth, which was a lot of extra work that I wasn't anticipating. And we also got to stand outside. Fortunately, it wasn't this year because the rain would have, but the rain, we stood outside in the rain in the front of Collins Park every day for at least 6 to 8 hours, and had an engagement with almost everyone who walked into the park. And it was exciting because I'm really interested in inviting the public to participate in public art in any number of ways, to hopefully walk away with something and feeling like they engaged with the work that I do in the public. And so here, I'm happy to be showing a piece called Ruth and Ernest, which is a bench, which is in the shape of a speech bubble, but you kind of, the best way to actually inhabit it or to rest in it is you recline. And there's something about resting in the speech that I'm interested in, and kind of being, I really feel like, first of all, there's way too many people I know here, which is awkward because, but my mom's in the back, so I can't say what I really think. But what I really love about being a part of this project and having been able to see, I've come for the past 10 years or 11 years in a row, so I've seen so many different iterations, and sometimes I really got it, sometimes I didn't get it so much, sometimes I like this and I didn't like this. But what I like about the way that you've been curating it is that there's artists that are in their 70s and there's artists that are in their 20s who work in any number of mediums outside of the public, but they're all kind of in conversation in this space. And so, and the way that you did your performance where you basically walked the whole path, and then I saw William Pope's Else piece started where your piece is, and to see this kind of carnival of confusion, both in why this exists and how am I supposed to interact with it, but then seeing the ways that which performance also plays into it, it's really exciting. And so, I realized that as an artist that the best thing that we get to do every day is to wake up and try to make our dreams come true, no matter how serious, no matter how wacky or unattainable they seem. And I think that's what I try to encourage people who interact with my work that's in the public to do, to like, okay, this is not what you woke up thought you were going to do. And even if it's just as silly or simple as like laying in a speech bubble, but like recognizing that your speech, like it's just the symbol of a speech bubble, recognizes that there's a space open for something to be said. And I like to encourage people to use that space. Thanks.
Sorry, is the title specific?
That's a good question. That was his job. The title, yes, I have a friend, my friend Jay, who lives in Peru where you live. My friend opened this restaurant It's just like a big restaurant in Peru. And last time I saw him, he was like, Hank, are you still telling the truth no matter how much it hurts? Because I have this knack for telling the truth no matter how much it hurts me. And he's always like, why would you say that? And then I have a cousin who said, my grandmother's name is Ruth. And she's like, Hank, we come from Ruth, so we could never be ruthless. And then, and that's the truth, Ruth. And so then I realized that my grandmother's father's name is Ernest. And I'm like, and my art, if you look at it, it's often pretty earnest. So I just can't escape it. And so the benches are kind of paying homage to my ancestors.
Okay, that's interesting. So we have some ancestors kind of going on here with the archaeological forms going back centuries, as well as the family ancestors going back a couple of generations, and maybe the Tai Chi knowledge as this kind of ancient form, the CrossFit fitness as this like super contemporary obsession. So I like the way you're talking, Hank, about these collisions and this chaos of different moments, different generations, different ideas. And as I said, to me, that's a part of kind of what's distinctive and fun about an art fair context. I mean, I'm curious to see how you guys feel about showing in an art fair context. Do you feel differently about it to other sort of exhibitions? What does it challenge you or give you, or what kind of experience is it for you that's distinctive, if it is?
Well, first thing that comes up for me is like, am I going to be able to make it through the next year? So like, what the awkward thing about this art fair is, really, for me, telling the truth, is this is where I get to make most of the money for the rest of the year. So if it's not a good art fair for anybody, but especially not for me, I'm like, now what? But it's also, I never got into making art to make money. I got into making art to make an impact. And so I think there's this weird dance of trying to be like, I'm here because I want to like affect people, affect the world, but then if people don't invest in what I'm doing, I gotta like start from scratch. And like I think that's a very tenuous place to make art from, for me. And I can't imagine with some of the work that you've done, like how you can like just be like, I'm gonna go do this, and it's beautiful. And I'm like, how does she even figure out how to like stay so kind of in the pocket with certain things?
Oh, I just never rely on it for income. Is basically how that works. But no, that I think it relates also to the concepts of this piece, like the economies of energy, like the way that people, like the men, just like that insane use of just like showmanship, and then this more efficiency of the use of energy and like channeling your energy in different ways. And I think that can go, you can think of that like with the fair.
You can go to the extreme as with the guys on the right to the ones on the left.
Yeah. And I guess it depends on the result that you want of how you're channeling the movement or the money or whatever it is that you're.
We had this truth booth here, like literally there's nothing for sale. We're just getting people to deposit their truths. And I'm like, this may not be the smartest thing to be doing in the art fair, but like getting to engage with people and not being about money, for me was the fulfilling experience in the context of an art fair.
I think I really enjoyed actually the public opening night after the welcome speech and all that, because I got to see all the kind of the kids and families interacting with my work. And I truthfully hadn't thought about it too much as a really commercial thing, especially the public work. I was like, I want to do this work. I want to make sure it gets shown in the kind of right context. And I think having it in the gardens does that. I think I was made aware afterwards by my gallerist. It's like, all right, we got to put a price on it, and we got to, move this, because what do you do with this work if you don't do that? So that's the
take it back to Peru.
Ship it back to Peru, brick by brick.
Which, to me, is also fascinating when you take a landscape from one place and put it in another place where also so many people, there are so many, at least, I don't know if it ethnically, like Peruvian nationals that are here. Does that like have any, is there a discourse with the South American, Latin American community?
Well, I realized that actually that brick that I use isn't used here very much for construction. So that had a different kind of reading or meaning to people who come from Latin America where it's prevalent. And here it was like, oh, so you made this thing, did you make every block that way? You know, did you form them yourself? And I find that, like, you know, if showing this work in the context of Peru, it's like, okay, this is about our cities, our buildings, etc. Here, it seems like a big terracotta piece.
It's super flat here.
Yeah, it's super
also.
flat, yeah. So it's, you know, but I think there are a lot of Peruvians that enjoyed seeing the reference to the pre-Inca and Inca temples, and they could understand that type of energy there.
And see, for me, I've seen that in your work all the time.
Yeah.
But I'd never put that in the context of the Andes. I thought it was something, so that just makes me have to rethink everything. But also the best thing for me about art fairs is that, like, it's kind of like a weird family reunion every year because we were in a show together in 2005, but we haven't seen each other or spoken
Where was that?
since at Greater New York.
Oh, 2010, Greater New York.
That was
I think
5
we were
years
another,
ago.
yeah.
But yeah, you know, my math is, I'm an artist. But what happens is all these people who you don't really get to interact with, people who you only see like their work online or in a gallery space, you never get to talk about their work. Because people frequently say, like, you're an artist, why are you here? It's like going to a sausage, a butcher to see like but I'm like, I don't make work. I wouldn't make something that I didn't feel, I want to know the people who interact with my work, but also want to meet the people behind the work that I see, because so often I have this mysterious idea of who the artist is, and I'm like, how come I can't think like that? And then I meet them and I recognize they're a normal person, but they just have a different approach to expressing themselves, and that's like,
Wow, you've had a really different experience from me. Boy.
say how?
Artists, normal people? Have you-
Well,
No, I'm kidding you.
I think being the son of a curator, I might say the curators are the strange ones.
Touche.
Because they actually want to engage with the artist, which is like,
I'm a son of an
Do you want
artist,
to
so
come
it's all
back
normal.
next year, Hank?
exactly.
So-
No, see, because I say that because I never wanted to be an artist, because all of my mom's friends, you know, some of whom who were in the Venice Biennial, like that guy over there, were broke. Raise your hand. And I was like, why are you spending all your time? I don't want to be one of those people. I want to like make a living. But then I realized, because I was raised by people who followed their dreams, I had no other choice. And I think that's, to be in this world and this space where it's like everyone deposits their ideas, their thoughts, things they care about, and then there's nurturers like you who say, you've never done this before, try to do it. And also the gallerists who are like, say like, for one reason or another, better for worse, I believe in you, and I want other people to believe in you. That's like a magical thing, and I want to participate in that.
Right. And I think, yeah, another magical thing maybe I think Ishmael touched on, which I'd be curious to hear more about from you guys, because I certainly notice it a lot working in the public art field, because I think artists, you know, exhibit their work a lot in their galleries, in museums, different kinds of institutional contexts, where the audience is primarily art-savvy people, where, you know, certain kinds of reactions, certain kinds of dialogue, you know, a certain mode of talking and responding is kind of what you come to expect. So often I've heard artists who've done a public installation kind of be really delighted, somewhat surprised, engaged by the responses of the non-art audience, right? Families, people just coming to experience the work with no expectations, with no particular, you know, sort of specialized knowledge, And I think that is something that the installation here offers. So I'm curious to see if that is something that you think is kind of interesting here.
And I think I come from a very kind of privileged situation. My mother's also here in the audience, and
Raise your hand.
she's a,
Wow, it's Mother's Day
Mother's Day.
here. This
My dad's
yo
here.
moms.
and she's a painter, and my father was a writer. And so I come from a situation where I was raised amongst creative individuals, and I think the biggest rebellion you could be was be a lawyer or something. You know, it's like that wasn't just not cool. So I think it's always been interesting for me to think back to the way I was raised and to think about the way people interpret my work, because I've always tried to kind of reach out. It is about the body, and it is about, I guess, humanity in its essence. I want to be as generous as I can be with the type of work I do, and yet still be personal with it. So I want people to come into it with their own, I guess, their own readings, their own life, and bring their power and their energy into it. And I think in the best moments with my work, that's what happens. I see someone and they engage with it. And I love that. That's why I'm still doing it. It's not about the money.
Is it different in a, like where the audience is a non-art or is like a broader kind of audience?
Well,
How does that?
I think that's what I was saying about the kind of the welcome reception, which was a little bit more the art world, and then the opening night to the public. There's a huge difference between the type of people that went to that. And the second one was a lot more relaxed and a lot more kind of like, wow, and you could see these kind of like kids with their eyes kind of like opening up and seeing the world. And I think sometimes from the art world perspective, we get very jaded. I think as we see so much that it's like it kind of becomes just as like, there it is. So.
Xavier.
I guess I did notice on the first night that the more people were paying attention to the Tai Chi girl than, or it was like pretty equal. But on the second night, I think immediately people were asking, when are those muscle men coming? And like mobs of people just, and then I think that the Tai Chi was kind of more neglected on the public night, which I thought was interesting. Yeah.
See, the question I asked you about her performance was like, what did you propose? Did you just say like, I'm going to do
very
something?
Specifically that piece.
Like how did the conversation? I'm curious, and I'm sure other people here. How does like how does a conversation start about doing a performance in a public art context?
You draw up an AutoCAD and present a whole.
Like there's these three guys. You see these three guys here? They're gonna.
Well, he mentioned the thing about doing a performance and sent the map of Collins Park, or described it to me, and that just like immediately, I don't know, and I sent him some YouTubes of men doing the tire exercises and a woman doing Tai Chi. It was just that. It was pretty casual, the development. I was like, this is what I want to do.
But then, did you tell them?
Yeah, I think I remember you also sort of talking about kind of something that had a Miami kind of connection or a feeling of somehow relating to the body culture and that kind of new age.
I think I remember you mentioned the ethos of self-improvement, which is such a thing right now, not just with fitness, but with, I guess, in the art world or anything. Yeah.
The thing that I was surprised by was watching the three guys talk to each other and encourage each other and challenge each other, because that's like if you're from a distance, they're just like guys doing some weird stuff, but then you hear them like, come on, give him one more time, and then you're like, and you realize that they're really like trying to push each other.
Yeah. They were invested in giving a good show too.
Did you coach that or?
No. I had like a list of their score, of what they were supposed to do, and then in rehearsals, just realizing that some of them, none of them had actually done tire tractor exercises. Oh. That's not the way they.
But they hadn't performed before either, right? So this is.
One of them was a circus performer, and but the other two I think are just big. And
they were born that way.
And like a bodyguard, and yeah.
Wow.
Okay, so I know people in the audience might have questions too, and I want to make sure we have time for that. So if you do have a question, please raise your hand, and someone's going to bring mics. There's one here, and then there was one there. But yeah, please go right ahead.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed hearing your explanations. I'm just curious, when you made the proposal, as each of you as artists, do you conceive of your creation to fit for Miami, or is it a more universal approach? Did you need to see Xavier was mentioning that she received maybe a diagram of what the park was like, so it partly answered the question for you, but I was curious for Hank and for you, and if you had to, do you feel you have a universality to your creation, and it was something that you would have done wherever, for any place in the world?
I would hope so. I would hope it'd be universal, you know. I think you apply for, my gallery applied for the fair, and you know, Nicholas and his team kind of looked over it, and the application definitely had a conscious part about it, which is about kind of moving this big piece from Peru to here. So there was a kind of element of that which was important in and decontextualizing it from the desert in Peru to this kind of like lush palm tree garden. So that's as Miami as is, but the rest, I would hope it would work in most of the contexts it could fit into.
So, and for me, I think it's unique because I think actually my piece came out of the piece from last year. So and so I think that's why I was invited to apply to come back. Was I wanted, last year was really this thing that you can go into inhabit, and then from that I was able to do a project with the Public Art Fund, and they showed me a space. They're like, "What are you going to do here?" and coming from a photographic background, and I've done public art, but mostly video projects in public art, I had to start think about what I would realize based off of this truth project, and the bench came out of that, and so I applied with that, and you know, I think you were already familiar with it, fortunately, so it was great, but I didn't expect, you know, and so I can't wait till next year. Because whatever comes out of this, with the heavy guy, maybe we can have those guys like picking the bench up, and you know, you can make that out of bricks.
Yeah.
Sure, why not?
Okay, it's all done for next year.
Just don't be surprised.
There's one piece in the show that's very site-specific, which is by Francisco Ugarte from Guadalajara. Beautiful piece. If you see the white fins, and that's actually traces sun paths specifically for this location at this time of year in Miami Beach. And it's from 7:15 a.m. through to 4:15 p.m. And if there's no shadow on that particular fin, it means it's exactly 10:15, 11:15, 12:15. Wow. So if you acquire that work, he'll remake it for your location. But it is actually very specific to Collins Park and looks amazing, I think. So we had another question. Yes.
Well, I guess it's in part has been addressed, but the question was more for you as a curator, whether in the process of the galleries recommending artists for the public installations at the park, do you select based on specific projects, or are the artists selected based on the knowledge of their past work or ideas they have, and then they are actually commissioned to create specific projects for the park, or is that a combination?
Yeah, no, the applications from the galleries are for specific works. So you can't apply just saying, this is what I've done in the past, I'm going to do something great. There has to be a specific proposal, partly for practical reasons in that this all happens on a very tight timeline, between when galleries find out that they're in the fair to then figuring out what they are going to do, what they can apply for with the different sections of the fair. Then the artist has to actually make the work, if it's not already existing, and that all has to happen very quickly. So it really is a pretty fast-paced process, and it really is a mix. As I mentioned, Hank, I'd known this body of work very intimately, and immediately thought, this would look perfect in Collins Park, and has this great relationship with the work from last year, and fortunately Hank agreed, and the gallery too. Whereas Ishmael's piece, just came through the process. I saw it in the application, thought it looked really interesting, and that's how that developed. So that's kind of the. Yeah.
Are you intentionally international?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, and each year I feel like it gets more international. I mean, 2 artists from China this year, which we hadn't had in the past. You've got great Latin American representation. I'm really excited about kind of the increasingly international nature of the applications. Any other questions? Oh yeah, there's one in the back.
Hello? Would there be a place or a situation where an artist seeking the dialogue and sort of perhaps appreciation of the observer, where the quality of his work would be compromised in any way?
Sorry, I'm not sure I understood completely. The work would be compromised.
Well, the quality of the work would be compromised by the artist's wish to satisfy his audience.
To satisfy
The audience, the one observing the art. We had a panelist describing that as his major sort of force driving him, the interaction with the audience, the observer, kids, etc. Is the question
I think
unclear?
the compromise comes if in our ability to actually manifest what we're imagining. I think sometimes it's a time thing, sometimes it's a budget thing, sometimes it's a weather thing. Sometimes it's a placement. I feel like in all ways, sometimes, for instance, I have a piece in my gallery's booth that when he sent me a picture of it, I was like, that's too high. I don't think that looks good. And I saw it, I was like, wow, I'm so glad you hung it that high, because I would have never done that. And so I think sometimes artists can't be trusted to make all the decisions with their work all the time.
And I think as a public sculpture, you still have to, there's a lot of considerations. There are city codes and stuff, child safety, et cetera, that the city is involved with. Luckily with me, it hasn't been too much of an issue in this one, but it has been in the past. So.
People climb on your piece?
Yeah, I mean,
They
that
can?
could be they haven't said no. I don't know. I'm okay with it, but I don't think the park is. That would be that would be a legal issue.
I'm curious about that with Peru, because maybe to your question, is Peru different than the U.S. to?
Oh, you can do whatever you want there. I've done actions just in the middle of the street with bulldozers, and there, no codes, no.
So, maybe that.
yeah.
Just to demystify the process a bit, for artists who are not as well known or smaller, like more regional artists who are not maybe in New York or Peru, and I guess I'm asking, is it very expensive for a small gallery to apply or unknown artist, and who funds the work that actually then gets presented? It's more a budget question, I think.
It's an interesting question, because when I started doing this 3 years ago, I assumed that the bulk of the applications would come from sort of the wealthiest, most established galleries, because these things are expensive. Public art pieces usually have to have a certain scale. They might require concrete foundations, engineering. There has to be a process of approval with the city. So it's much more complicated than just like unpacking something and hanging it on a nail. So but I've been really it's been an interesting and kind of great surprise that so many galleries which are smaller, so often ones which are in the fair even for the first time, but really I think want to, because they're sort of starting out and really keen to make a name for their artists and themselves, they're prepared to sort of invest and really take advantage of the opportunity that doing a great public art piece brings, because the visibility is really strong. You know, you get such exposure, you get such media interest as well, potentially. So I think I've learned that it's not, you know, even though it can be expensive, that doesn't seem to be a barrier to entry for a lot of the younger galleries. And they, you know, come back actually year after year.
I also feel like, that's what I was starting to say before, is like, because the reason I chose to be an artist, other than the fact that I had no other choice, was that I like to point out that fine artists and dancers, I believe, are some of the only people who would gladly pay to do their job, and do pay to do their job. And so the budget is kind of, is my time not worth it? Like, whatever we call value as far as what you invest in it can be, it's not as simple as saying, like the Truth Booth. I had people who volunteered their time to come. I had people who I had to pay for. There's some people the gallery helped pay for. There's things that we had to get remade and but it's really a matter of, like, if you really want to make it happen, I find with artists, and that's why I'm so excited about the range in which we work, where you make it happen, because just the opportunity to present, because, like, you know, it's not every day that someone's like, hey, you want to put something in a park where hundreds of thousands of people are going to get to see it, and more talk about it. I was like, okay, sure, I'll figure that out. So, I mean, and so I think I think the everyday struggle is what are our own limitations of of our budget, you know.
And as Hank said earlier, also, I mean, it's great to have galleries that really want to support you. Even if their budgets are small, they like really want, and that's amazing as an artist to have that kind of experience and to be pushed that way.
Oh, okay, so I think that wraps it up for today. You're now invited for afternoon tea.
Cheers.